The stagecoach rattled into Columbus, New Mexico on a blistering June afternoon in 1885, and Penelope Easton knew the moment her foot touched the dusty ground that her carefully constructed world was about to crumble like sun-dried adobe. She had traveled 3 weeks from Boston to marry a man she had never met, a respectable rancher named Howard Bickford, who had advertised for a refined Eastern bride to bring culture and propriety to his sprawling cattle operation. But as Penelope stood there in her traveling dress, already wilting in the relentless desert heat, watching a tumbleweed roll past the weathered buildings that made up Columbus's Main Street, she felt the rigid corset of her old life tightening around her ribs until she could barely breathe. The telegram in her reticule had arrived just before she boarded the train in St. Louis. Howard Bickford had died of pneumonia 2 weeks prior. His lawyer suggested she continue to Columbus anyway, as there might be employment opportunities for an educated woman in the growing frontier town. Penelope had laughed bitterly at that, a sound that had startled the other passengers in her compartment. What employment could there be for a woman whose only skills included needlepoint, French, and the proper way to arrange a formal dining table? But she had nowhere else to go. Her parents had died the previous winter, leaving her penniless, and at the mercy of an uncle who had made his intentions toward her disturbingly clear. So she had climbed aboard that train with nothing but 2 trunks of increasingly impractical clothing, and a stubborn refusal to become another tragic statistic in the Boston newspapers. Now she stood in the middle of a town that looked like it had been thrown together by men in a hurry to get somewhere else. All unpainted wood and false fronts and dust that coated everything like a second skin. The few people on the street stopped to stare at her, this overdressed Eastern woman with her ridiculous hat and her kid leather boots already ruined by the journey. She lifted her chin and stared back, refusing to let them see the panic fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. "You look lost, miss." The voice came from behind her, low and amused, with a rough edge that spoke of whiskey and cigarettes and long nights under open skies. Penelope turned and found herself looking up at a man who seemed to embody everything her Boston finishing school had warned her against. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. Dark hair fell past his collar in a way that would have scandalized every matron on Beacon Hill. He wore dusty range clothes, a gun belt slung low on his hips, and a hat pushed back to reveal a face that was all hard angles and quiet amusement. He was, she realized with a little jolt, extremely handsome in a way that had nothing to do with the pale, proper gentleman she had grown up around. "I am not lost," she said, drawing herself up to her full height, which still left her a good 6 inches shorter than him. "I am simply orienting myself to my new surroundings." His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Orienting yourself. That is fancy talk for standing in the middle of the street looking like you just saw a ghost." "I beg your pardon," Penelope said icily, channeling every ounce of aristocratic disdain her grandmother had ever demonstrated. "I do not believe we have been introduced." "No, madam, we have not." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that somehow managed to be both respectful and mocking. "Owen Norris, at your service. I work the Triple Bar Ranch north of here, and I am guessing you are the Boston bride Howard Bickford sent for." The words hit her like a physical blow. Of course everyone would know. In a town this size, everyone knew everything. "I was," she said quietly. "I received word of Mr. Bickford's death just before I left St. Louis." Something shifted in Owen Norris's expression, the amusement fading to something that might have been sympathy. "That is rough luck. You came all this way for nothing." "On the contrary," Penelope heard herself say, "I came all this way to start a new life. The specific circumstances have simply changed somewhat." Owen studied her for a long moment, and Penelope had the unsettling feeling that he was seeing past all her carefully maintained defenses to the terrified woman underneath. "You have a place to stay. I am certain there is a boarding house or hotel." "There is the Columbus Hotel," Owen said, gesturing to a 2-story building that had seen better days. "Mrs. Henderson runs it. She is decent enough, though she has opinions about everything and is not shy about sharing them." "I appreciate the information." Penelope turned to collect her trunks from where the stagecoach driver had dumped them in the street, but Owen was already there, hefting both of them as if they weighed nothing. "I will help you get settled," he said, and started walking toward the hotel before she could protest. Penelope hurried after him, her skirts kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. "That is quite unnecessary. I am perfectly capable of managing on my own." "Did not say you were not capable," Owen said without slowing down. "But these trunks are heavy, and you look like you are about to melt in that getup. Consider it a welcome to New Mexico." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she felt like she was about to melt. The layers of petticoats and the steel-boned corset that had been perfectly appropriate in Boston were instruments of torture in this heat. By the time they reached the hotel, she could feel sweat trickling down her spine and her face was flushed. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a large woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She looked Penelope up and down with an expression that suggested she found her wanting. "You are Howard Bickford's mail-order bride. Heard about his passing. Shame that. He was a good man." "So I understand," Penelope said, trying to maintain some dignity despite feeling like a wrung-out dish rag. "I am hoping you might have a room available." "I have a room," Mrs. Henderson said, "but it costs $2 a week, paid in advance, and that does not include meals. $2 a week." Penelope did a quick calculation in her head. She had $43 to her name, the last of what her parents had left her. That would give her enough for maybe 5 months if she was very, very careful. "That will be acceptable, Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, as if she had expected an argument. "Room is at the top of the stairs, second door on the left. No gentlemen callers, no drinking, no loud noises after 9 o'clock. Breakfast is available at the diner next door starting at 6, dinner until 8. Owen carried her trunks up the narrow staircase while Penelope followed, increasingly aware of how close the quarters were, how intimate it felt to have this stranger in her space. The room was small and spare, with a narrow iron bed, a washstand, and a single chair. A window looked out over the main street, offering a view of dust and more dust. "It is not the Ritz," Owen said, setting her trunks down carefully, "but it is clean and Mrs. Henderson runs a tight ship." "It will do perfectly well," Penelope said, though her heart sank at the sight of it. This was her new reality. No more silk wallpaper or mahogany furniture or servants to bring her morning tea. Just this small room in a small town at the edge of civilization. Owen stood there for a moment, hat in his hands, looking like he wanted to say something. Finally, he spoke. "I know it is not my place, but what are you planning to do? For work, I mean. There are not many opportunities for women here, and most of them are not the kind a lady like you would consider." Penelope lifted her chin. "I will find something. I am educated. I can read and write and do figures." "Surely someone needs a clerk or a bookkeeper or a teacher." "The school already has a teacher, Miss Abernathy, and she has been here for 20 years. The general store and the saloon keep their own books." Owen hesitated. "Look, I do not mean to discourage you, but Columbus is not Boston. Things work different here." "I am beginning to understand that," Penelope said dryly. "But I do not have the luxury of discouragement, Mr. Norris. I came here with a plan, and even though that plan has fallen through, I will simply have to make a new one." Something like respect flickered in Owen's dark eyes. "You have grit. I will give you that. Most Eastern women would be on the next stage back to civilization." "Most Eastern women have somewhere to go back to," Penelope said before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air between them, revealing more than she had intended. Owen looked at her for a long moment, and Penelope felt that uncomfortable sensation again, like he was seeing past all her pretenses. "Well then," he said finally, "welcome to Columbus, Miss Easton. I hope you find what you are looking for." He left then, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs, and Penelope was alone in her small room with the late afternoon sun slanting through the window, and the realization that she had absolutely no idea what happened next. She sank down onto the bed, which was harder than it looked, and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of complete and utter panic. Then she stood up, unpinned her hat, and began to unpack. Over the next 3 days, Penelope learned several important things about Columbus, New Mexico. First, it was even hotter than she had initially thought possible, and her Boston wardrobe was not just impractical but actually dangerous in this climate. Second, Mrs. Henderson had opinions about everything, as Owen had warned, but underneath her sharp exterior was a woman who had survived her own share of hardships and had a grudging respect for others who did the same. Third, employment opportunities for educated Eastern women were even more limited than Owen had suggested. The school did not need a teacher. The general store did not need a clerk. The newspaper, such as it was, consisted of one cranky old man who typeset and printed everything himself, and clearly considered Penelope's offer of assistance an insult to his abilities. By the third day, as she walked back to the hotel in the blazing afternoon heat, she was beginning to wonder if she would have to consider those opportunities Owen had delicately declined to mention, the ones a lady would not consider. She was so lost in her increasingly desperate thoughts that she did not notice the commotion in the street until she was almost in the middle of it. A horse, a beautiful paint mare, was rearing and plunging while a young boy clung to the reins, clearly terrified. Men were shouting, trying to help, but their sudden movements only made the horse more frantic. Penelope did not think. She simply moved, walking directly toward the panicked animal with her hands outstretched, making soft, shushing sounds. The horse's ears swiveled toward her, and Penelope kept walking, kept making those soothing noises, the same ones she had used with her uncle's horses back in Boston when she would sneak away from her studies to visit the stables. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "Easy now. No one is going to hurt you. You are just scared, that is all. Just scared and hot and confused, and I understand that because I feel exactly the same way most of the time." The horse's wild eyes fixed on her, and Penelope kept walking until she was close enough to reach out and touch the mare's nose. The animal snorted but did not pull away, and Penelope kept up her stream of soft words, running her hand down the mare's neck, feeling the tension begin to ease from the trembling muscles. "There you go," Penelope said. "There is a good girl, see? Everything is all right, everything is just fine." The boy was staring at her with wide eyes, still clutching the reins. "She just spooked," he said in a shaky voice. "Something scared her and she just started going crazy." "Horses have big feelings," Penelope said, keeping her hand on the mare's neck. "Sometimes those feelings are bigger than they know what to do with. But she is calming down now, are you not, sweetheart? Where did you learn to do that?" Penelope turned to find Owen Norris standing a few feet away, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I spent a great deal of time in my uncle's stables," she said. "The horses were better company than most of the people I knew." Owen's mouth quirked in that almost smile again. I am starting to think there is more to you than fancy dresses and proper manners, Miss Easton. I could say the same about you, Mr. Norris. You are proving surprisingly helpful for a cowboy. Who said cowboys cannot be helpful? Owen moved closer, checking the mare's tack with practiced efficiency. This saddle was not cinched properly. No wonder she spooked. When it started slipping, she probably thought something was attacking her. The boy looked mortified. I am sorry, Mr. Norris. I was in a hurry and I guess I did not do it right. Well, no harm done thanks to Miss Easton here. Owen finished adjusting the saddle and handed the reins back to the boy. But next time, do it right the first time. A spooked horse can kill someone. The boy nodded earnestly and led the now calm mare away. The small crowd that had gathered began to disperse, and Penelope suddenly became aware that her hair was falling down from its pins, and her dress was dusty, and she had just made a complete spectacle of herself in the middle of town. Again. That was brave, Owen said, or foolish. I have not decided which. Probably both, Penelope admitted. I did not really think about it. I just saw that she was frightened and I wanted to help. You have a way with horses. Owen tilted his head, studying her. Can you ride? I used to. It has been a few years, but yes, I can ride. Owen was quiet for a moment, and Penelope had the sense that he was turning something over in his mind. The triple bar needs someone to help with the horses, he said finally. We have got 3 mares that foaled this spring, and they need to be gentled and trained. The boss, Jacob Sterling, usually handles it, but he broke his leg last month and is laid up for at least another 6 weeks. I have been trying to do it, but I have got my regular work to handle too, and the horses are not progressing like they should. Penelope's heart began to beat faster. Are you offering me employment, Mr. Norris? I am saying that if you can do with those foals what you just did with that mare, Jacob would probably pay you a fair wage to come out to the ranch and work with them. It would not be easy work. It is hot and dirty, and you would be dealing with animals that do not always want to cooperate. But if you are serious about needing employment, well, it is something. It was something. It was more than something. It was a lifeline thrown to her just when she was beginning to drown. I am serious, Penelope said. Very serious. All right then. I am heading back to the ranch this afternoon. If you want, you can ride out with me and meet Jacob. No promises, but at least you can see the place and he can see what you can do. Penelope looked down at her dress, already ruined by dust and horse slobber. She thought about her room at Mrs. Henderson's hotel, about her dwindling funds, about the letter from her uncle that was probably waiting for her back in Boston, demanding to know where she had gone. She thought about all the rules she had learned, all the proper behavior that had been drilled into her since childhood, about how a lady never did physical labor, and certainly never worked on a ranch with a crew of rough cowboys. Then she looked up at Owen Norris, with his dusty clothes and his easy confidence and his dark eyes that seemed to see her more clearly than anyone ever had, and she smiled. When do we leave? The Triple Bar Ranch was an hour's ride north of Columbus, and by the time they arrived, Penelope's entire body ached from riding in a borrowed saddle on a borrowed horse. Owen had found her a gentle gelding from the livery stable and a split riding skirt from somewhere, though he had declined to say where. Penelope suspected he had borrowed it from one of the saloon girls and decided not to ask. The skirt was more practical than anything she owned, and right now practical mattered more than proper. The ranch itself was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings and corrals that held dozens of horses in various stages of training. The land stretched out in all directions, brown and dusty but somehow beautiful in its vastness, with mountains rising purple in the distance, and the sky so big it made her dizzy to look at it. Owen led her to the main house, where a man sat on the porch with his leg propped up on a stool. Jacob Sterling was in his 50s, weathered and gruff, with iron-gray hair and eyes that assessed her with the same thoroughness he probably used when evaluating horses. "This is the Boston bride," he said without preamble. "This is Miss Penelope Easton," Owen said. "And before you say anything, you should know she just calmed down Charlie Henderson's spooked mare in the middle of town without so much as blinking. I think she might be able to help with our problem." Jacob's bushy eyebrows rose. "That's so. Charlie's mare is mean as a snake when she is riled up." "She was not mean," Penelope said, finding her voice. "She was scared. There is a difference." Jacob studied her for another long moment, then gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Miss Easton. Tell me about your experience with horses." So Penelope sat, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in her borrowed skirt and dusty blouse, and told him. She told him about her uncle's stables, about the hours she had spent there when she was supposed to be practicing her needlepoint or studying French. She told him about the difficult stallion everyone said was untrainable, and how she had worked with him every day for 6 months, until he would take a saddle and ride her. She told him about the mare who had been abused and learned to trust again, about the foals she had helped birth and raise. She did not tell him that the stables had been her refuge, the one place where no one expected her to be perfect and proper and everything she was not. She did not tell him that the horses had been her only real friends, that they had never judged her for being too loud or too curious or too much. But somehow, looking at Jacob's weathered face, she thought maybe he understood anyway. When she finished, Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, I will give you a trial. 2 weeks working with the 3 foals. If they show progress and you can handle the work, the job is yours for as long as you want it. $20 a month plus room and board if you want it, or you can ride in from town each day." $20 a month. It was not much, but it was enough. More than enough. It was independence and purpose, and a chance to do something she actually loved instead of something proper. "I accept," Penelope said, "and I will take the room and board if the offer is genuine. It will save time and allow me to work with the horses in the early morning when they are most receptive." Jacob nodded. "Owen will show you to the bunkhouse. We have got a small room off the back that the previous foreman used. It is not fancy, but it is private and it has got a good lock on the door. I run a respectable operation here, Miss Easton. Any man who treats you with anything less than respect will find himself unemployed and probably nursing a broken jaw. But you need to understand the men are not going to be happy about a woman working here. You are going to have to prove yourself." "I understand," Penelope said. "I have been proving myself my entire life. This will be nothing new." Something like approval flickered in Jacob's eyes. "Fair enough. Owen, get her settled and introduce her to the boys. And Miss Easton, welcome to the Triple Bar." The room was small and spare, not much better than her hotel room, but it had a real bed with a quilt that looked hand-stitched and a window that looked out over the corrals. There was a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small wardrobe, and a wooden chair. It was more than Penelope had hoped for. Owen lingered in the doorway after helping her bring in her trunk. "The men will give you trouble at first," he said. "Not mean trouble mostly, but they will test you. See if you are serious or just playing at being a cowgirl." "I appreciate the warning," Penelope said, "though I suspect you are one of the men who will be testing me." Owen's mouth quirked in that almost smile. "Oh, I already know you are serious. I saw that the first day, standing in the middle of Columbus looking like you were ready to fight the whole territory if you had to." Penelope felt something flutter in her chest, something warm and unfamiliar. "You have been surprisingly kind to me, Mr. Norris. I am not sure why." Owen was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she had heard it before. "Maybe because I know what it is like to not fit in where you are supposed to. To feel like the world has a shape you are supposed to squeeze yourself into, and no matter how hard you try, you just do not fit." Their eyes met, and Penelope felt that flutter again, stronger this time. There was something in the way Owen looked at her, something that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I should let you get settled," Owen said, breaking the moment. "Dinner is at 6 in the main house. Jacob's wife, Mary, does the cooking, and she is going to want to meet you. Fair warning, she is going to have opinions about a proper Eastern lady working with horses." "Everyone seems to have opinions about proper Eastern ladies," Penelope said. "I am getting used to it." After Owen left, Penelope unpacked her trunk and changed into one of her simpler dresses. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was sunburned, her hair was coming loose from its pins, and there was a wildness in her eyes that had never been there before. She looked, she thought, like someone who was finally beginning to wake up after a very long sleep. Dinner at the main house was an education. Mary Sterling was a formidable woman who ran her kitchen with the same efficiency Jacob brought to the ranch. She fed Penelope more food than she had eaten in a week, all while asking pointed questions about her background and her intentions. The ranch hands, 6 men ranging from a boy barely into his 20s to a grizzled old cowboy who looked like he had been born on horseback, watched with undisguised curiosity. Owen sat at the end of the table, saying little but watching everything. Penelope could feel his gaze on her as she answered Mary's questions, as she politely accepted second helpings of stew and cornbread, as she tried to look more confident than she felt. Finally, when the meal was finished and Mary started clearing plates, one of the younger cowboys spoke up. "So you really think you can train those foals?" His tone was skeptical but not unkind. "They are pretty wild." "All young things are wild," Penelope said. "It is part of learning who you are and what you are capable of. The trick is not to break that wildness, but to channel it into something useful." The old cowboy, who had been introduced as Red, let out a bark of laughter. "You hear that, boys? She's going to channel their wildness. That is a fancy way of saying she is going to get kicked into next week." "Maybe," Penelope said calmly, "but I have been kicked before and I am still here. Are you willing to make a wager on it?" That got everyone's attention. Red leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. "What kind of wager?" "If I cannot get all 3 foals halter trained and leading properly within 2 weeks, I will personally cook dinner for the entire crew for a week. But if I succeed, you all have to admit that maybe, just maybe, a proper Eastern lady might know a thing or two about horses." The men exchanged glances, and Penelope could see them weighing the odds. Finally, Red stuck out his weathered hand. "You got yourself a deal, Miss Easton, though I hope you know how to cook, because those foals are demons." Penelope shook his hand firmly. "Then I suppose we will find out together." As the men filed out, returning to the bunkhouse or to check on the animals one last time before bed, Owen lingered behind. "That was smart," he said. "Giving them something to root for, even if they are rooting against you. It makes you part of the crew instead of an outsider they have to tolerate." "I learned a long time ago that the best way to deal with skeptics is to give them a reason to want you to succeed," Penelope said. "Even if that reason is just the entertainment of watching you try." Owen studied her in the lamplight, and Penelope felt that awareness again, that sense of something building between them that she did not quite know how to name. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. "Neither are you," Penelope admitted. When I first saw you in Columbus, I thought you were just another rough cowboy. But you are more than that, are you not? You see things. You understand things. My mother was a teacher, Owen said. Back in Texas before she died, she made sure I could read and write and think for myself. She used to say that a man with education and a trade could go anywhere and be anything. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Owen's expression softened with memory. She would have liked you, I think. She always admired people who were not afraid to be themselves, even when the world told them they should be something else. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Penelope felt her pulse quicken, felt that strange warmth spreading through her chest again. This was dangerous territory, this pull she felt toward Owen Norris. She barely knew him. He was a cowboy, a ranch hand with dusty clothes and calloused hands and a life that could not be more different from everything she had been raised to expect. But when he looked at her, she felt more alive than she ever had in all her proper Boston drawing rooms. I should go, Owen said, though he did not move. You need rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Mr. Norris, Penelope said before she could stop herself. Owen, thank you. For everything. For helping me find work, for believing I could do this. You did not have to do any of it. Owen smiled. A real smile this time, not just that quirk of his mouth. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less guarded. You are welcome, Penelope. And for what it is worth, I think those foals do not stand a chance. He left then, and Penelope walked back to her small room in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Horses nickered in their corrals. Someone was playing a harmonica in the bunkhouse, and the night wind carried the scent of sage and dust, and something wild that she was only beginning to understand. She lay in her narrow bed, watching moonlight paint patterns on the wall, and felt something very much like hope stirring in her chest. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of hard work, sore muscles, and small victories. The foals, 2 colts and a filly, were indeed demons, as Red had promised. They kicked and bit and ran circles around her in the training corral. But Penelope was patient. She spent hours just sitting in the corral, letting them get used to her presence, talking to them in that same soft voice she had used with the spooked mare in Columbus. Slowly, gradually, they began to trust her. The first colt, a leggy bay she named Rusty, was the easiest. He was curious and brave, and within 3 days he was taking carrots from her hand and allowing her to slip a rope around his neck. The filly, a pretty sorrel with a white blaze, was more difficult. She was skittish and suspicious, and it took nearly a week before she would let Penelope approach without bolting. But once she decided Penelope was safe, she became almost affectionate, following her around the corral and nuzzling at her pockets for treats. The second colt, a stocky dun with a stubborn streak a mile wide, fought her every step of the way. He would tolerate the halter for a few minutes, then explode into bucking and rearing that sent Penelope diving for the fence. He stepped on her foot twice, knocked her into the dirt more times than she could count, and generally made her question every life choice that had brought her to this moment. But Penelope did not give up. She got up every time she fell, brushed herself off, and went back in. And slowly, painfully, the dun colt began to respond. On the 13th day, he stood quietly while she slipped the halter over his head and led him around the corral. On the 14th day, he followed her like a puppy, and Penelope knew she had won. Owen watched her work every day when he could spare the time from his own duties. He would lean against the corral fence, hat pushed back, that almost smile on his face, and Penelope found herself increasingly aware of his presence. She liked the way he looked at her, with respect and admiration and something else, something warmer that made her breath catch when their eyes met. She liked his quiet humor, the way he could make her laugh even when she was exhausted and sore. She liked the way he moved, easy and confident, and the way his hands looked when he demonstrated a knot or adjusted a piece of tack, strong and capable and gentle all at once. She was falling for him. She knew it and could not seem to stop it, even though every rational part of her brain insisted it was foolish. She had known him for 2 weeks. She was here to work, to build a new life, not to lose her head over the first handsome cowboy who was kind to her. But rationality seemed to have very little to do with what she felt when Owen smiled at her, or brushed past her in the barn, or sat next to her at dinner, and their shoulders touched. On the 15th day, she demonstrated her progress to Jacob and the assembled ranch hands. All 3 foals wore their halters without fuss and led obediently around the corral. Red watched with his arms crossed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Well, I will be damned," he muttered. "She actually did it." "Which means you all owe me an admission," Penelope said, trying not to sound too smug as she removed the halters and turned the foals loose. They immediately trotted over to her, hoping for treats, and she laughed and rubbed their soft noses. The men exchanged glances, and finally Red stepped forward. "All right, Miss Easton, I admit it. You know your way around horses better than most men I have met, and that is the truth." The others echoed his sentiment, some more grudgingly than others, but Penelope could see the respect in their eyes now. She had proven herself, earned her place here through hard work and stubborn determination. It felt better than any compliment she had ever received at a Boston dinner party. That evening after dinner, Owen found her sitting on the corral fence watching the sun set over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple and gold, so vivid it did not seem real. Everything about New Mexico felt that way to Penelope now, more vivid and real than her old life had ever been. "You did good," Owen said, climbing up to sit next to her. "Better than good. Those foals are going to make fine horses." "I had good material to work with," Penelope said. "And I am lucky Jacob took a chance on me. It was not luck, you earned it." Owen was quiet for a moment, looking out at the sunset. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really come west?" "I mean, I know about the mail-order bride situation, but there must have been other options back in Boston. You are educated, you come from a good family. Why risk everything to marry a stranger?" Penelope was quiet for a long moment, trying to figure out how to explain. "Because in Boston, I was drowning," she said finally. "Everyone had such clear ideas about who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to live, and none of those ideas had anything to do with who I actually was. I was supposed to marry well and run a proper household and raise proper children, and never do anything unexpected or improper or real. And I just could not do it. I felt like I was suffocating, like if I stayed there one more day, I would just disappear completely and become this empty shell of a person going through the motions of a life I did not want. So you decided to marry a stranger in New Mexico instead." "I decided to try something different," Penelope corrected. "To see if maybe somewhere else, somewhere where no one knew me or had expectations about what I should be, I could figure out who I actually was. It was terrifying. It still is terrifying. But it is better than slowly dying in a life that was never really mine." Owen was looking at her now, and in the fading light his eyes were very dark and very intent. "And have you figured out who you are?" Penelope thought about the last 2 weeks, about the hard work and the sore muscles, and the satisfaction of earning respect through her own abilities. She thought about the way the horses trusted her, the way the land made her feel small and infinite all at once. She thought about Owen, about the way her heart beat faster when he was near. "I am beginning to," she said softly. I am beginning to understand that who I am might not be proper or respectable or anything my old world would recognize. But maybe that is all right. Maybe proper is overrated." Owen laughed, a real laugh that made her smile in response. "I have been saying that my whole life. Never understood why people cared so much about doing things the right way when the right way usually just meant boring and predictable. Is that why you became a cowboy? To escape being proper?" "Partly. My father wanted me to take over his store in San Antonio, spend my life behind a counter adding up numbers and making polite conversation with customers. It was a good life, respectable. But I kept looking out the window at the land beyond town and feeling like I was missing something important. So when I was 18, I left. Broke my father's heart, probably, but I could not make myself into what he wanted me to be. Do you ever regret it?" Owen was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No. This life is hard and sometimes lonely and there are no guarantees. But it is real. Everything I do matters. Every decision I make has consequences. I am not just going through motions or living up to someone else's expectations. I am living." "Yes," Penelope breathed. "That is exactly it. That is exactly what I was trying to explain to everyone back home, but they did not understand. They thought I was being dramatic or foolish or throwing my life away. But you understand." "I understand," Owen said, and his voice had gone soft and low in a way that made Penelope's skin prickle with awareness. "I understand more than you know." They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the deepening sky. Penelope was intensely aware of Owen next to her, of the warmth radiating from his body and the way his hand rested on the fence rail just inches from hers. She wanted to reach out and close that small distance, wanted to feel his rough fingers intertwine with hers, but she did not quite dare. "Penelope," Owen said, and her name in his rough voice sent shivers down her spine. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." Penelope's heart began to pound. "All right." Owen turned to face her fully, and in the twilight his expression was serious and a little uncertain, vulnerability showing through his usual confidence. "I have been working ranches for 10 years now. I have met a lot of people, been to a lot of places. And in all that time, I have never met anyone like you. You are brave and stubborn, and you do not give up even when everything is stacked against you. You are smart and funny, and you see things, really see them, in a way most people do not. And you are beautiful, but not in that fragile way that makes men want to put you on a shelf and protect you. You are beautiful in a way that makes me want to see what you are going to do next, how you are going to surprise me." Penelope could barely breathe. "Owen." "Let me finish," he said, and there was a plea in his voice that made her fall silent. "I know we have only known each other a couple weeks. I know you came out here looking for something, and maybe romance is not part of what you were looking for. But I cannot help how I feel, and I feel like maybe, just maybe, you might feel something similar. And if I am wrong, if I am reading this all wrong, then I apologize and we can forget I said anything. But if I am right, if there is even a chance I am right, then I need you to know. I need you to know that when I look at you, I see someone I could build a life with. Not some proper, respectable life that fits what people expect, but something real and honest and completely our own." The words hung in the twilight air between them, and Penelope felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to take a step that would either let her fly or send her falling. Every rule she had ever been taught was screaming at her to be cautious, to be sensible, to not throw herself at the first man who said pretty words. But those rules had never served her well. Those rules had nearly suffocated her. "You are right," she said softly. "You are right about how I feel. I have been trying not to feel it, trying to be sensible and focused on my work, but every time I see you, I feel something that has nothing to do with being sensible. You make me feel alive in a way I never have before. You make me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could be myself completely and that would be enough." Owen's hand moved to cover hers on the fence rail, his calloused fingers warm and sure. "It would be more than enough. You are more than enough exactly as you are." Penelope turned her hand over, threading her fingers through his, and felt something click into place in her chest. This was right. This was what she had been looking for without even knowing it. Not just independence or purpose or escape from her old life, but connection. Understanding. Someone who saw her and did not want to change her. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Owen smiled, that real smile that transformed his face. "Well, I was thinking maybe we could start by me kissing you if that would be acceptable." Penelope laughed, feeling giddy and reckless and more alive than she had ever felt. "That would be very acceptable." Owen stood and pulled her to her feet, and suddenly they were very close, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes and smell the scent of horses and leather and sun-warmed skin. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone, and Penelope's breath caught. "You are sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to back away. "I am sure," Penelope said, and rose on her toes to close the distance between them. The kiss was everything she had never let herself imagine. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. Then Owen's other hand came up to tangle in her hair, and the kiss deepened, became something more urgent and real. Penelope pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and felt years of propriety and restraint crumbling away like old plaster. This was what she had been missing. This wildness, this passion, this sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the day I met you standing in the street in Columbus, looking like you were ready to fight the world." "I have been wanting you to do that for almost as long," Penelope admitted, "though I have been trying very hard not to admit it, even to myself." "Why?" "Because I came here to find myself, not to lose myself in someone else. I was worried that if I let myself feel this way about you, I would just end up repeating old patterns, becoming what you wanted instead of figuring out who I was." Owen pulled back enough to look at her properly. "I do not want you to become anything other than what you are. I like who you are right now in this moment. Stubborn and brave and a little bit improper." Penelope laughed. "More than a little bit improper. I am standing in the dark kissing a cowboy I have known for 2 weeks. If my grandmother could see me now, she would expire on the spot." "Good thing your grandmother is not here then," Owen said, grinning, "because I plan on kissing you a great deal more if you will let me." "I will let you," Penelope said. "I will let you, and I will not feel one bit guilty about it, because this feels right in a way that all that propriety never did." They kissed again, and then again, until the stars were thick overhead and the night had turned cold. Finally, reluctantly, Owen walked her back to her room, holding her hand the entire way. At her door he kissed her one more time, soft and sweet, a promise. "Sleep well, Penelope Easton," he said. "Sleep well, Owen Norris," she replied, and slipped inside her room with her heart singing. Over the next few weeks, as summer deepened into July and the heat became almost unbearable, Penelope and Owen carved out a relationship that belonged entirely to them. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings they stole time alone whenever they could. Sometimes they rode out to watch the sunset. Sometimes they just sat and talked, sharing stories about their pasts and dreams about their futures. Sometimes they simply held each other, communicating in touches and kisses what words could never quite capture. The ranch hands noticed, of course. It was impossible to keep anything secret in such close quarters. But if they disapproved, they kept it to themselves. Penelope had earned their respect, and Owen was well liked. Even Mary Sterling, who had been skeptical at first, softened when she saw how happy Owen made Penelope and vice versa. Jacob was the only one who said anything directly. He caught Penelope alone one afternoon while she was working with a new group of yearlings in the training corral. "I am not blind," he said without preamble. "I see what is happening between you and Owen." Penelope felt her face heat, but she met his eyes steadily. "Is that a problem?" Jacob was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "Not for me, as long as it does not interfere with the work. But I want you to understand something, Miss Easton. Owen is a good man, one of the best I have ever known. But he is also restless. He has been here longer than he usually stays in one place, and I have been wondering when he is going to get the itch to move on. If you are getting serious about him, you need to know that." The words hit Penelope like cold water. "Has he said he is planning to leave?" "No, but I know the type. I used to be the type before I met Mary and realized I had found something worth staying for. I am just saying you should make sure you and Owen are on the same page about what this is and where it is going." Jacob left her to think about that, and Penelope found herself troubled for the first time since she and Owen had started whatever this was between them. They had never talked about the future, not really. They lived in the moment, taking each day as it came. But was that enough? Could it ever be enough? That evening she found Owen in the barn checking on a mare who was due to foal any day. He looked up and smiled when he saw her, that warm, open smile that always made her heart skip, and Penelope felt her resolve waver. But she had to know. She had to understand what she was building her hopes on. "Jacob talked to me today," she said, leaning against the stall door. "He said you have been here longer than you usually stay in one place. Is that true?" Owen's smile faded slightly. "He said that, did he? Is it true?" Penelope pressed. Owen sighed and came to stand next to her, his shoulder touching hers in that casual intimacy they had developed. "It is true that I usually do not stay in one place more than a year or two. I get restless. I want to see what is over the next hill, try my hand at something new. But Penelope, that was before I met you. Everything is different now. Is it? Or are you just saying that because it is what I want to hear?" Owen turned to face her, his expression serious. "I am saying it because it is true. I am not going to lie to you and tell you I have never thought about leaving, because I have. It is what I do. It is who I have been. But staying, building something permanent with you, that is a new kind of adventure, one I want to try." "But what if you change your mind?" Penelope could hear the fear in her own voice. "What if 6 months from now or a year from now you wake up and realize you are bored and restless and you want to leave? I cannot do that, Owen. I cannot build my life around you and then watch you walk away." Owen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very soft. "Do you know why I never stayed in one place before? It was not because I was brave or adventurous or any of those things people think. It was because I was scared. I was scared that if I stayed, I would end up like my father, trapped in a life that was safe and respectable and slowly killing him from the inside. I was scared that if I let myself care too much about anything or anyone, I would lose my freedom. So I kept moving, kept myself from ever getting too attached." He reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "But then I met you, and for the first time in my life I am not scared of staying. I am scared of losing you. I am scared that my past is going to make you doubt what we have. I cannot promise I will never be restless or that I will never wonder what is beyond the next horizon. But I can promise that wherever I go, I want you with me. And if you need me to stay here to put down roots and build something permanent, then that is what I will do, because you are worth it. We are worth it." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want you to change who you are for me. That is what everyone in my old life wanted me to do, and it almost destroyed me. I do not want to do that to you." "You are not," Owen said. "You are giving me permission to become something more than I was, something better. You make me want to be the kind of man who stays, who builds, who plants roots and watches them grow. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Penelope searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or reservation, but all she saw was honesty and love, and that fierce determination that had drawn her to him in the first place. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want to build something with you, something that is ours and no one else's." Owen pulled her close, and Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Then let us do it," he murmured into her hair. "Let us build something improper and beautiful and completely our own." They stood there in the barn as the light faded and the horses settled for the night, holding each other and making silent promises. Penelope felt something tight in her chest finally release, that last bit of fear letting go. This was right. This was what she had been searching for. Not safety or security or respectability, but this wild, honest love that asked her to be nothing but herself. A week later, Owen rode into Columbus on his day off and returned with a small gold ring. He found Penelope working with the yearlings and called her over to the fence. "I have something for you," he said, and held out the ring. Penelope stared at it, her heart suddenly pounding. "Owen, it is not fancy," he said. "I could not afford anything with stones or engravings, but it is real gold and it is yours if you want it, if you will have me." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Penelope could barely get the words out. "I am. I know we have not known each other long. I know there are 100 reasons why we should wait and be sensible and do this properly. But I have never been good at doing things properly, and I do not want to wait another day to make you mine in every way that matters. So yes, I am asking you to marry me. I am asking you to build this improper, beautiful life with me. What do you say?" Penelope looked at the ring, at Owen's hopeful, vulnerable face, at the life stretching out before them full of possibility and adventure. She thought about everything she had left behind in Boston, all the rules and expectations and careful plans. She thought about the woman she used to be, trapped and suffocating, and the woman she was becoming, wild and free and unafraid. "Yes," she said, and it was the easiest word she had ever spoken. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Owen whooped and pulled her over the fence, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, deep and long, not caring who might see, and Penelope kissed him back with all the joy and relief and love in her heart. They were married 2 weeks later in Columbus's small church, with the triple bar crew and half the town in attendance. Penelope wore a simple dress in cream-colored cotton that Mary Sterling had helped her sew, practical enough for ranch life but pretty enough to feel special. Owen wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, looking nervous and proud and so handsome it made her breath catch. The minister, Reverend Thompson, was an old man who had seen enough frontier life to not be shocked by much. But even he raised an eyebrow when he got to the part about proper wifely obedience, and Penelope's lips tightened. Before the Reverend could continue, Owen spoke up. "Actually, Reverend, I was hoping we could skip that part. My bride is not going to promise to obey me because I do not want her to. I want a partner, not a servant." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. The Reverend frowned. "Young man, that is part of the traditional ceremony." "Then maybe we need a less traditional ceremony," Owen said. Because I am marrying Penelope exactly as she is, stubborn and independent and completely herself. If she wants to obey me, she can, but I am certainly not going to require it." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. She squeezed Owen's hand and looked at the Reverend. "I will never be proper," she admitted, the words coming out stronger than she expected. "I will never be the kind of wife who stays quiet and obedient and demure. I will speak my mind and work alongside my husband and probably do 100 things that will scandalize respectable people." "Is that acceptable?" Owen laughed, a joyous sound that echoed through the small church. "Good. Neither will I. Let us be improper together." A shocked silence followed these words, and then Red's voice rang out from the back. "Well, I will be damned. Marry them, Reverend. These two deserve each other." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and even the Reverend's stern face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "Very well," he said. "I pronounce you husband and wife, and may God help you both." Owen kissed her before the Reverend finished speaking, and the small church erupted in cheers and applause. Penelope kissed him back, this man who saw her and loved her and asked nothing of her except that she be herself. This was what freedom felt like. This was what love felt like. Wild and improper and absolutely perfect. The reception was held at the ranch, with Mary's excellent cooking and music provided by several ranch hands who turned out to be surprisingly talented with fiddle and guitar. Penelope danced with Owen under the stars, whirling and laughing, dizzy with happiness. She danced with Red and the other hands, with Jacob who managed despite his still healing leg, even with the minister who loosened up considerably after a glass of whiskey. As the night wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing, Owen pulled her away from the crowd, leading her out past the corrals to where the land opened up under the vast New Mexico sky. "I have something for you," he said. "You have already given me a ring and a wedding and the best day of my life," Penelope protested. "What more could there be?" Owen led her around the side of the barn, and there stood a small cabin that had not been there that morning. It was simple but solidly built, with a porch facing the mountains and windows that would let in the morning light. "Jacob gave us this piece of land as a wedding present," Owen said. "The boys and I have been working on the cabin for the past week, whenever we could spare time. It is not finished inside yet, we still need furniture and a proper stove and 100 other things. But it is ours, our home, our place to be improper together." Penelope stared at the cabin, tears streaming down her face. "You built this for us, we built it for us," Owen corrected. "You are going to help finish it and make it ours in every way. I just wanted to surprise you with the start." Penelope threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "It is perfect. You are perfect. This whole ridiculous, improper, wonderful day is perfect." Owen carried her over the threshold of their unfinished cabin, both of them laughing, and made love to her on a blanket spread over the rough wooden floor. There was nothing proper about it, nothing respectable or refined. It was wild and honest and real, two people discovering each other without pretense or shame. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, watching moonlight paint patterns through the windows, and talked about their plans. They would finish the cabin together, making it a real home. Penelope would continue working with the horses, building a reputation as one of the best horse trainers in the territory. Owen would keep working for Jacob, learning everything he could about running a ranch. Someday, maybe, they would have their own spread, their own horses, their own life built from nothing but hard work and love. They would have children, raise them to be wild and free and true to themselves. They would grow old together, sitting on the porch of this cabin watching sunsets and remembering the day they decided to be improper together. "Are you happy?" Owen asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I am more than happy," Penelope said. "I am alive. For the first time in my life, I feel completely, fully alive." "Good," Owen said, "because this is just the beginning. We have a whole lifetime of improper adventures ahead of us." Penelope smiled and kissed him, long and deep, a promise and a celebration all at once. Outside, the party was still going strong, music and laughter drifting on the night wind. But here, in their unfinished cabin, it was just the two of them, building something new from the ashes of their old lives. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Penelope and Owen finished their cabin, adding rooms as they could afford the lumber and time. Penelope's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and people started bringing their difficult horses from as far as Santa Fe and El Paso for her to work with. Owen took on more responsibility at the Triple Bar, and when Jacob's health began to fail 5 years after their wedding, he and Mary sold the ranch to Owen and Penelope. They renamed it the Improper Ranch, much to the amusement of everyone who knew them. The sign over the gate featured a rearing horse, and the motto, "Where wild things learn to fly." It became known throughout the territory as a place where difficult horses were transformed, and where unconventional methods were not just tolerated but celebrated. Their first child, a son they named Thomas, was born 2 years after their wedding. He came into the world squalling and red-faced during a thunderstorm, and Penelope fell in love with him instantly. Owen cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face as he whispered promises to this tiny person who depended on them completely. Thomas was followed by a daughter named Caroline, then another son named James, and finally another daughter named Sarah. The cabin expanded with each child, growing from 2 rooms to 6, sprawling and comfortable and full of noise and love. Penelope taught her children to read and write, but also to ride and rope and think for themselves. Owen taught them to work hard and be honest, and never let anyone tell them who they should be. The children grew up wild and free, brown from the sun and comfortable in the saddle. Thomas showed his mother's gift with horses and became a renowned trainer in his own right. Caroline had her father's restless spirit and eventually left to see the world, sending letters from San Francisco and Seattle and places even farther away. James stayed close to home, taking over much of the daily ranch operations as Owen and Penelope grew older. Sarah, the youngest, became a teacher, opening a school in Columbus that taught children of all backgrounds, from ranchers' kids to those of the Mexican families who worked the nearby farms. On their 20th anniversary, Owen and Penelope rode out to the spot where he had first kissed her all those years ago. They were both older now, weathered by sun and wind and hard work. Penelope's hair had threads of silver running through it, and Owen's face had deep lines around his eyes and mouth. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been at the beginning, brave and reckless and willing to risk everything for love. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked, sitting on the fence rail just like she had that first evening. "Giving up your wandering life to stay here with me?" Owen laughed, the same laugh that had made her fall in love with him so many years ago. "Not once, not for a single second. This life, this improper, beautiful, chaotic life we built together, is better than anything I could have imagined. You gave me something I did not even know I was looking for." "What is that?" "A home. Not just a place, but a feeling. The knowledge that wherever you are, that is where I belong." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "You gave me the same thing. You gave me permission to be myself, completely and unapologetically. You loved all the parts of me that I had been taught to hide." They kissed as the sun set, the the same sun that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their children, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. When they pulled apart, Owen touched her face gently, his thumb tracing the laugh lines around her mouth. "Let us make a deal," he said. "Let us be improper for the rest of our lives. Let us never become respectable or staid or any of those boring things. Let us stay wild and free and true to ourselves until the very end." "Deal," Penelope said, and sealed it with another kiss. They kept that promise. Even as they grew older, even as their hair turned gray and their bodies slowed down, they maintained that spark of wildness that had brought them together. They still rode out to watch sunsets. They still danced at parties, not caring if their dancing was no longer as graceful as it once was. They still spoke their minds and challenged conventions and lived exactly as they chose. Owen passed away first, at the age of 73, dying peacefully in his sleep with Penelope's hand in his. She held him as he took his last breath, whispering all the things she loved about him, thanking him for the life they had built together. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched, from ranch hands he had worked with to families whose horses Penelope had trained. Thomas gave the eulogy, talking about a father who had taught him that being a man meant being honest and kind and true to yourself above all else. Penelope lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, continuing to work with horses until her body simply would not allow it anymore. She never stopped wearing the simple gold ring Owen had given her, turning it on her finger whenever she missed him, which was constantly. But she did not let grief consume her. She had promised to stay wild and free, and she kept that promise. She died on a spring morning with all 4 of her children around her bed. Her last words were about Owen, about the day he had asked her to be improper with him, and how that had been the beginning of her real life. "Do not be proper," she told her children and grandchildren. "Be yourselves, completely and without apology. Build lives that make you feel alive. That is all that matters in the end." They buried her next to Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The headstone reads simply, "Penelope Norris." She was never proper, and that was perfect. The Improper Ranch continued for 3 more generations, run by Thomas and then his children and then their children. It remained a place where wild things learned to fly, where conventional wisdom was questioned, and where being yourself was not just accepted but celebrated. People came from all over to hear the story of Owen and Penelope Norris, the cowboy and the Boston bride who had decided to be improper together, and had built something beautiful from that simple decision. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right and the sun set over the mountains in shades of orange and gold, people swore they could feel something in the air, something wild and free and full of love. Some said it was just the wind. But those who knew the story better believed it was Owen and Penelope, still together, still improper, still exactly as they had always been. Their legacy lived on not just in the ranch or their descendants, but in everyone who heard their story and found the courage to be themselves. They proved that proper was overrated, that love could be wild and still last forever, that 2 people from completely different worlds could build something beautiful if they were brave enough to try. They showed that the best life was not the most respectable one, but the one that was most true to who you really were. And that, in the end, was the greatest adventure of all.